For those inside of art Twitter, they often see it as a refuge for their acquired tastes, a place to come together with like-minded individuals to explore their niche artistic passions. But what happens when you attract the ire of this community? How far can things go? And furthermore, at what point does trolling someone justify life-ruining retaliation? This is the story of Chipple, his penchant for making everyone angry at him, and the lengths people went to take revenge that went far beyond the scope of what he could have ever imagined. It's a story of overweight furries, comedic video games, death threats, deplatforming, and doxing. Strap in. Chipple began his channel in December of 2016. His first upload was a fan-made music video for Joe Hawley, but he wouldn't gain traction until uploading a series of cartoons he did after. Based on a viral Garfield parody by Pilot Red Sun, they were interesting, with titles like Garfield emotionally abuses John and then himself, and Garfield becomes God and vores the universe. It caught people's attention. He also uploaded an Oni Plays animation called Carl the Brain Cell. These videos each reached over 1 million views, with the latter sitting at 3.6 million. They spread across social media as reaction images, becoming his first meme. That was enough to leverage a following on Twitter, which he became active on throughout 2019. Here, Chip continued to post art as well as observations about various trends. He tended to be at odds with what was popular on the site. This allowed him to grow as a contrarian. But his biggest break came after the return of Minecraft. For a while, the game had fallen out of style. It was considered cringe and for children. But in March, then rising YouTuber Call Me Carson started a Let's Play series called SMP Live. It had an all-star cast, being played on by streamers like Junkie Janker, Wilbur Soot, and Pokimane. This proved extremely successful, to the point it's often credited for the game's resurgence. Being a fan of Carson, Chip was inspired to start his own server with a twist. The map would be a 1 to 3,000 replica of Earth. He tweeted about the idea and got the attention of Wilbur Soot, who reached out in support. The result was SMP Earth, which launched in November of 2019. Boasting over 60 creators, including Carson himself, it was already set to be massive. But after SMP Live shut down 2 months later, it became the series' spiritual successor. This placed his creation at the forefront, with episodes receiving upwards of 12 million views. While Chip stumbled into this by luck, he helped shape the series early on. He arranged in-game events and even crafted an ARG. He also started an in-server religion called Braphogism. Okay, alright, here we go. These efforts paid off in establishing himself as a key player. Before its launch, he sat at under 5,000 followers. That number doubled by the end of the year. His channel also surpassed 50,000 subscribers, but the exposure to a new audience was a blessing and a curse. His platform was built on offensive humor. This was present in the trailer itself, with the thumbnail showing Jeffrey Epstein's temple. That put him at odds with the audience these streamers were cultivating. SMP Live and SMP Earth were the start of Minecraft stan Twitter. They're basically fandoms obsessed with specific creators, to the point of emotional attachment. This can extend as far as fan fiction, ship art, and sexual harassment. Naturally, Chip saw this developing subculture and responded in mockery. For example, it became trendy to call the game's creatures trans. This led Chip to post a cartoon character having a meltdown with the caption, LGBTQ Twitter when you ask how the Minecraft bee is trans. In general, he began picking fights with his newfound audience. In one argument, he reaffirmed a user's bio stating that they were actually autistic. He was subsequently hit with the accusation of being an ableist. But no matter the backlash, he persisted, only becoming more and more frequent. On December 2nd, Chip posted a comment criticizing stans for having anti-capitalist views while worshipping celebrities. It received over 6,000 likes, though he got an equal amount of backlash. His mentions were flooded with death threats and people calling him slurs. He remarked, "I've been called a faggot by more K-pop stans from this tweet alone than I ever had from Anons on 4chan, and that says something." He then created the 20-year-old K-Poomer to call them female incels. There was a clear cycle even early on. Chip would get annoyed, say something inflammatory, and double down until people gave up. Because of this, there started to be a vocal subset who hated him. They wrote call-out posts about how frequently he appeared on their timeline. These accumulated thousands of interactions. They didn't go unnoticed by his peers, who came to view him as a liability. But for as long as SMP Earth continued, it had remained behind the scenes. In the meantime, Chip became acquainted with other artists on Twitter. His newfound relevance enabled him to form new friendships. That included another growing creator named John Bob, who put Chip in his Halloween bash. It was these kinds of gifts that put John at the center of their community. He'd involve other artists in his work as fan art, from games to animations. Though it began without permission, it led to mutual growth, so they allowed it. This brought otherwise disconnected artists together to form a shared audience. It was like nothing art Twitter had seen before, and over the span of a year, John gained 35,000 followers. While still controversial in these circles, Chip was regarded more positively. They were more accepting of his antics. antics. On April 5th, 2020, a viral tweet led to debates over Newgrounds. The post compares the site's art style to the often derided Cal Arts. It also calls people who draw this way bigoted. Chip mockingly created a template for people to mimic both. It went viral, with figures like Shen Comics weighing in. 4 days later, Chip satirized a pro-shoplifting cartoon strip. It had the character attempting to steal a rotten green egg. This was also a hit, garnering 30,000 likes. But even the art community had limits. He'd occasionally cross the line for them and say things like, multi-fandom cartoon enthusiast is just a different way of saying not allowed within 1,000 feet of a school. This was taken personally by a multi-fandom cartoon enthusiast who felt it was a targeted attack. Remember that Chipple Dipple is the same bigot that actually thinks femcells are a thing and called me a sex offender just because I like cartoons. I better not see any of y'all supporting his goofy ass. The call out received over 2,000 likes. On April 11th, SMP Earth was shut down, lasting a total of 142 days. It helped launch the careers of Tommy Innit, Jay Schlatt, and Wilbur, but the series went stale as players drifted away. Those who stayed relevant became the foundation of Dream SMP weeks later. And if you know anything about Dream's audience, you know where this is going. While no longer involved, Chip remained in proximity, and he became increasingly annoyed at what it became. In retaliation, he crafted a block list containing thousands of stan accounts. He announced his intention publicly, which was spun as harassment. If you don't know, Chipple Dipple has a stan block list that he plans on releasing. This will cause hundreds of people to come into our community, possibly to harass and dox us. Chip knows what they're going to do, but is still going to release it. Not only is that the exact opposite use for a block list, but why would they need it? These were all accounts that identify themselves as stans. If Chip had made these arguments, he may have quelled the flames, but instead he played into it. When asked, why don't you sentence another neurodivergent and LGBTQ+ child and family to death, he replied, don't threaten me with a good time. When told he was encouraging doxing minors, Chip simply said, yeah. While funny, this gave ammunition to their accusations of doxing. He'd poisoned the well to the point that it was difficult to defend him. 4 hours later, the official SMP Earth Twitter disavowed his creator. We do not condemn nor support the actions of an ex-staff member threatening to dox and attack over 1,000 users because of their status on blocking him. This staff member is no longer connected to SMP Earth and hasn't been for months. Not only had Chip been ousted beforehand, but they alluded to behind-the-scenes drama. This iceberg was elaborated on the next day by a former collaborator named Michael McChill, who called out Chip on a live stream.
Once again, these fucking days continue to get worse. And long story short, Chipple Dipple, yes, I'm finally saying names, is being a fucking idiot. It's been a long fucking time coming. He is a complete cunt. He deserves entirely to be, and right fucking now, to be deplatformed. If you follow Chipple Dipple, the creator of SMP Earth, I heavily fucking suggest unfollowing him.
You heard that right. Chip had done something worthy of deplatforming. What was it, you may ask? Having a bad sense of humor, of course.
Shut the fuck up. Stop being a piece of shit. Stop being a fucking asshole. You are entirely infatuated with this fucking Newgrounds, fucking 4chan, fucking mentality, and it's disgusting. Whenever you take just the edge, you end up looking like a fucking pizza cutter. All edge, no point. Chip, for the love of fucking God, either step off your platform or probably be prepared to be deplatformed. On a scale of Keanu Reeves to Onision, how would you rate him? Yeah, below Onision, like off the scale.
He does eventually shed light on grievances beyond the public outrage, but it amounts to petty managerial issues. The most valid critique, and perhaps most relevant, are his frustrations with Chip's online presence.
All you have to do is fucking sit there, smile, and wave. You were fucking given a ton of fucking free publicity for creating a server when you did nothing, when you did jack shit the entire fucking time. I'm sick of it. And a lot of other fucking creators are sick of it too. You blocked me on fucking everything, called me a pussy, and fucking, you know, didn't move on from there. Make your move, motherfucker. Remember? Swing at me, and let's fucking see how quick you fucking drop.
As comical of a reaction as this is, the point still stands. To most online personalities, their image matters a lot. This is especially true in the Minecraft community, where creators are scrutinized for their associations. By ruining his own reputation, he jeopardized everyone around him. There's a reason no one came to bat for him publicly. With such a public fallout, this could have been a moment of reflection. It wasn't too late to change. He'd vowed to several times, with the most notable example being the Dippler's Decree. He pledged to never make annoying or controversial tweets ever again, but given this was posted 2 months before the block list, it's clear he didn't follow through. In fact, just weeks after, he posted a comic about using Wojaks in real life. It amassed 20,000 likes. While Chip continued to stir the pot, it's worth noting his growth had plateaued. He reached 24,000 followers in June of 2020 and hovered slightly above and below that for the next 3 years. For as many people he brought in, he offset a near equal amount. Though his follower count stayed the same, the amount who hated him didn't. He became increasingly notorious and more people became alienated. By the end of 2020, he was blocked by approximately 8,500 people. Chip changed his name several times to escape previous connotations. He eventually decided on Fractal County, promising to focus on game development. But even this was infected by his need to post. He became obsessed with fat fetish art he found of the General from Johnny Test. He eventually named him Sergeant Braphog and even bought its copyright from the original artist. Old habits die hard, I guess. Remember John Bob? On August 30th, 2020, John outed himself as a groomer. His words, not mine. He admitted to dating a 15-year-old while 18. He also convinced the victim to draw pornographic art to masturbate to. It happened in early 2019 before he found success online. Because of this, he tried to salvage his reputation by saying he learned his lesson. That was undermined when several other minors came forward. John was using his platform and connections to solicit nudes from fans. Immediately, his empire collapsed. He lost 9,000 followers before deactivating for good. The news came amid a string of oustings, with artists like Tarhead and Get Good Nami also being exposed. It was devastating for the community. The subject became taboo to discuss, with even the mere mention resulting in criticism. Nothing makes that more apparent than Bedhead Bernie's documentary in December. It covered John's rise and fall, as well as the allegations against other artists. Bernie sought closure for a community he felt needed it. Instead, they accused him of monetizing the situation and being disrespectful by not contacting victims. The former just wasn't true. The video was never monetized. But he explained the latter a month prior. It feels invasive to go out of my way to pester people, so I'll just leave an open offer here. If you knew John Bob and would like to share your account, feel free to DM. Many who criticized his coverage hadn't watched it in the first place, but one of his critics was exposed for being friends with John a year later. John was planning a comeback that halted after Bernie's video. If this was enough to catch their ire, then you can only imagine how they'd react to jokes. Well, you don't have to. Chip had already begun to burn bridges in that community. His friends mocked John before he was outed, which he epitomized in this nonsensical image. Though most seen were in the community, the sides were completely random. I mean, he put himself on the same side of Epstein. The humor came from people trying to decipher its meaning. Similarly, he devised a scheme to craft the most controversial inflammatory tweet in art Twitter history. The result was a comparison between Twitter and Newgrounds artists. Twitter is called Definitely a Groomer, while Newgrounds is racist. In the documentary's fallout, Chip defended his right to exist. He felt there was no reason John Bob should be off limits. This culminated on August 30th, 2021, exactly a year after he was outed. That day, Chip uploaded an edit he made of the disgraced artist. It was an ironic fan cam set to MGMT's Little Dark Age, but that didn't bode well for those that hated any reminder. Immediately, any bridge he had in the community was immolated, as former friends and associates disavowed. The video was framed as a groomer fan cam to imply he was in support of pedophilia. I don't know how you can think that when this image is in it, but yeah. It's obviously at the expense of the predator, not in favor of them. There are hundreds, no, thousands of memes like this for people like EDP, but they'd prefer it if people never acknowledged the situation at all. With such a level of backlash, you'd expect it to have ended there. Most would have apologized even if they didn't mean it. But Chip doubled down, posting it again on the same day a year later. This cemented his character in the eyes of former friends and fans. They fought even harder for him to take it down. But something worse happened that proved more harmful. On September 3rd, one of John's victims revealed someone was spreading a video of them masturbating. They sent it to all of their mutuals stating, "Don't f with Fractal County." The victim began publicly threatening Chip with legal action and demanded a statement. This was misinterpreted as claiming Chip was doing so himself. He was flooded with accusations of sending pornography to children. It became such a problem, the victim issued a clarification that it wasn't him. But here's where it gets confusing. The individual sent the victim another DM, "I don't like Chip and I didn't come from him. You posted the video yourself." They were a troll inflaming both sides. It's one thing to take responsibility for the acts of fans, but this wasn't even a fan. Despite knowing this, the screenshot was never shared publicly. Instead, the victim would go on to directly accuse him of being responsible. I'm pretty positive it was him who revenged me, considering ignoring the fact he's openly admitting to sending people disturbing imagery on an alt in order to get them to shut the fuck up about something he's doing. Revenge porn has a specific legal implication. It implies he either took advantage of them or hacked their account. Both of these are claims of illegality with no actual basis, yet mere suspicion was enough for the label of revenge pornographer. It's worth emphasizing how disproportionate of a response this was. Chip made fun of a predator in a way they didn't like. In response, he was smeared as a pedophile and sex criminal. It's one thing to find the guy annoying, but that's not justification to fabricate allegations and share them as fact. This is a common attitude on Twitter. You can't just dislike someone, there has to be a grander moral justification. The video can't just be distasteful, it has to be in favor of grooming. In late 2020, nearly 10,000 people had him blocked. That's when the service tracking the statistics shut down. By 2023, his For You page was barely functional due to the sheer amount of blocks. Needless to say, there were few people in his corner. He'd made enemies with Stan Twitter, content creators, and now artists. This set the stage for the controversy that ultimately destroyed his career and, potentially, his life. There's an important character flaw that I haven't mentioned yet. Beyond the rage bait, incessant arguing, and doubling down, there's something that many probably don't understand. He has an obsession with potty humor to an almost unhealthy degree, and I mean this with no exaggeration that it led to his downfall. On February 3rd, 2023, a thread was created with a single line of text. For whatever reason, Fractal County decided to show me his shit. The chat logs showed Chip sending a photo of excrement in his hand with the caption, "I made this." Then he's sure to clarify, "It's my poop." The user shows the image couldn't be found anywhere else online. Now I know what you're thinking. There's no fucking way he actually did this, right? Like, we all find poop funny once in a while, but why? Well, as it turns out, it wasn't actually his poop. I know, disappointing, right? The image had gone viral a year prior, coming from a now deleted user named John Nolan. He actually did what Chip was accused of doing, defecating in his hand and showing people. In fact, on the Internet Archive, you can find him tweeting the same thing publicly. The reason the image didn't show up is because his account is now deleted. As for why he sent it in the first place, he explained, "The reason why I said it was mine is simple. I thought the person was annoying and it would be funny." In fact, he decided not to clarify the truth because it was funnier. But what he didn't realize, and what became a huge talking point, is that the recipient was weeks away from turning 18. How horrifying. This was exaggerated to the point that the poop allegations were spun into a sex crime. I'm not joking. Aren't you the guy who shat into his hands to send a pic of it to a then underage girl who called him a loser? Just making sure that was you, yeah? Chip replied, though it wasn't archived, to which the user said, "I committed a sex crime to shut up the minor who was accusing my friend of a sex crime." The post received thousands of likes and remains the main accusation against him. People straight up started calling him a pedophile for this. It's bizarre because what is inherently sexual about poop? You can think it's weird, but the emphasis on someone being a minor is strange. Is seeing shit traumatizing to a 17-year-old? It got to the point that it was even picked up by commentary channels. The most egregious was probably Boblax's coverage. The two had argued in the past due to his handling of a previous controversy. He referred to Boblax as a human parasite. Naturally, Boblax took a victory dance.
But I don't know why he, of all people, would call me a human parasite, considering he goes out of his way to send poo to children on Discord. And the poo pics he sent are actually of him. He literally took a grabbed it with his bare hands, took a picture of it, and posted it to someone on Discord.
But in fairness, Boblax is not the worst offender. He was just one of many reiterating this claim because they personally disliked Chip. If getting called a revenge pornographer, groomer supporter, and now predator wasn't bad enough, it gets worse. Hours later, Chip posted an image using the meme format. An argument between these six would be priceless. It had completely random people, including animator Psychic Pebbles and Randy Marsh from South Park. This image caught the attention of Pipka, one of the people whose avatar was featured. In response, she quote tweeted him saying, "Can you not use me for clout? I don't want anything to do with you. Thanks." The result was people flooding his mentions and quote tweets. The most notable of these was from Real YouTube Kids, who made a chart of the Chip cycle. Does something to piss someone off, the person they were trying to piss off gets pissed off, acts like a moron and pretend they're overreacting while doubling down at the same time, followers do some shit that crosses the line, act like you had nothing to do with it, and absolve yourself of all responsibility. The tweet received over 18,000 likes and 1 million views. People began throwing every accusation I've gone through before. Not just the recent ones, but claims like he was doxing minors. It brought together every single person who he'd pissed off in the past 4 years. But the most vocal were Pipka's fans. People began accusing him of specifically targeting her for her identity. She followed it up by saying, "What a shitty way to start the morning, dude. I'm almost 20 and I'm still getting harassed for no reason. Next time it happens, I might straight up just call federal." I can't reiterate this enough. The photo was entirely entirely meaningless. The response of people trying to decipher what it meant to no avail was intentional. It was no different than the other posts he'd made for years, but the difference is that this time it was directed at Pipka. Pipka, also known as NES Cartridges, is a Twitter artist with almost 30,000 followers. While pretty harmless, she'd gotten flack over the years for her character, a fat imp. Many people found this really funny, to the point they began making edits of her farting. The animations were called Pipka Gassy, and had her alongside Nikocado Avocado, and a green Mr. Incredible. Okay. It was mostly dumb trolling, motivated by their belief that her persona was fat fetish fuel. This is epitomized by the specific 3D render they fixated on. Even the actual modeler wrote on their portfolio, "This particular character was quite a daunting challenge to make into a model, simply because she is one of the girthiest characters I ever had to work with." Chip was aware of this and had lightly poked fun in the past. It was undoubtedly the reason for her inclusion. But with tens of thousands on his back, he once again decided to double down. He quickly threw together a platformer game featuring Pipka. She's seen walking in Meal Meadows, eating french fries while burping and farting. It was a mockery of both the alleged fetish, as well as her recent game dev efforts. Chip posted a preview of this on Twitter, incensing the flames. Pipka called it an obese caricature and targeted harassment. She'd go on to threaten suicide, announcing in her public Discord that she was one gun store away from putting a Glock in her mouth. Because of this, she was going to leave Twitter. 3 hours later, she returned. At this point, Chip was pretty out of pocket. He didn't have any reason to go after her other than finding fat cartoons funny. If Pipka laughed it off or ignored him, as she seemed to imply she would, things would have de-escalated. But for some reason, she just couldn't do it. On February 24th, she held a stage in her server of over 1,400 people. Here, she accused him of starting all of the Pipka Gassy memes.
At the very least, I'm finally getting to the bottom of who's causing this, because through both the Twitter gifs and the Pipka army thing, it's Chip and whatever the fuck their server is doing. They're one of the people who started it. There's also that instant guy, Fractal County. There's some Z-list Twitter person that made a bunch of Garfield videos and dick rided off of that for the rest of their lives. That guy is a piece of shit. I asked him very nicely to just not use me in a meme. It's a very simple request. Just don't talk about me, because I want nothing to do with him. He already insulted my friends by posting a fan cam of a groomer. Now he's going after me for no fucking reason. I know that's not the nicest thing to say about them, but they've been harassing me for a year now, so that's the thing. Like, I feel like I'm too nice.
She'd go on to dispute any notion of having a fetish and claimed her persona was her actual body type.
I wish things could have been different. Partly, I wish I never made my Sona my actual body type at all. I wish I made her skinny. Because I feel like if I made her skinny, I would have none of these problems. People on Twitter are so unabashedly fat-phobic that it's embarrassing. Yeah, people on Twitter are just everything phobic, yeah. The exception is I don't have like a fetish for that. Like, I don't. It's just made up. So, like, who cares if I did? I know, I don't think you're weird for having that, but I feel uncomfortable, like, thinking of if I did. I get uncomfortable thinking about it, because I'm not into it.
Yet, she contradicts herself. In a different line of thought, she admits to not being that fat, in her own words.
For me, it's even worse because there's, like, people that just go out of their way to start hate campaigns, and the reason is always stupid. Like, oh, you're fat. Like, literally, that's usually just a reason. It's I'm fat. I'm not even that fat. I'm like 190 pounds. I'm chubby, so, like, you know, whatever.
But more importantly, she references an archive of NSFW artwork that she suspected Chip posted a link to.
Some of it is so bizarre or absurdist that it might be slightly convincing. And they also post not safe for work art I've made in my safe for work spaces. Like, I saw that entire folder. They saved almost everything. You know, most people won't get on me for drawing that kind of stuff. I mean, most people with a sizable following do on alternate accounts. And that's the thing that I also don't get is, like, people say that I draw not safe for work art on main, but I never have.
This Google Drive is filled with material from a separate, once public account. In spite of denying having a fat fetish, it all features morbidly obese women, including her own character. While there's no farting, there's an odd amount of burping, so the gassy thing is only half true. This one reads, side effects may include rapid weight gain, sudden extreme bloating, excessive belching, and a good time. There's also a drawing of King Hippo from Punch-Out! As a woman, getting penetrated in her belly button. Naturally, this removed any doubt from Chip's mind that it wasn't a fetish stylish character. He continued to develop the game, titling it Pipka's Gassy Adventure. He posted previews in the weeks that followed, including a Nikocado Avocado boss fight and a cutscene with Sergeant Braphog.
Now just what in the Sam fart are you supposed to be, maggot? Pathetic, just pathetic. You will never, ever be a Gassy warrior like me, the one and only Sergeant Braphog.
While her previous trolls may have had malicious intentions, Chips was simple. He just wanted to laugh at her character. But people continued to reiterate that he was making fun of her actual weight and being fat-phobic. This only led him to become more motivated out of spite. I think the view of most rational observers is that this whole conflict was pointless and stupid, but there were third parties making everything worse for both sides. Pipka and those associated with her were sent images of infant gore by someone named Octo. Yeah, what the fuck? They were seemingly a fan of Chip and asked if she liked Sergeant Braphog. Meanwhile, someone contacted Chip's mother in an attempt to have him kicked out of the house. They'd obtained his full name, address, and now family members. This culminated on March 27th when Chip launched the website Pipka.party. It contained nothing more than the text, "It's just getting started." Well, that's not entirely true. It also plays a burp sound effect. Immediately, Pipka posted about it on Twitter. I'm not going to say too much about this just because it isn't really worth my time or attention at this point, but I ask you to report the tweet. Obviously, this is not something I'm affiliated with, and I discourage giving it any more attention than I am right now. I'm busy making a real video game with a lot of talented people, so these personal attacks on my character are disheartening and way too far, but I can live my life without stressing about them for too long. But, like before, it didn't end there, as the exact same cycle repeated. People started claiming his site had an IP logger despite the source code being fully public, though his antics were noticeably cut short when Chip abruptly deactivated his Twitter. Never mind, I took it down, but GitHub isn't updating, don't even bother. GitHub is taking its time deleting it. Stop poking around shit you aren't supposed to, go away and leave me alone. GitHub Desktop is the worst piece of software ever. What is the point of a .gitignore file if it doesn't actually ignore anything and just upload everything indiscriminately? I'm actually tearing my hair out. It turns out, Chip had accidentally uploaded all of his information to GitHub. The site's source code had a section that listed his name, password, address, and phone number. Pipka.party was subsequently hacked and replaced with this. When word spread, Twitter began celebrating. They started mocking Evan Anderson and calling his cell phone. This meme even started to be spread around, parodying Walter White's confession. Then, 6 hours later, the website was updated. It now read, "It's over. Thank you for calling into the Fractal County hotline. For those who showed support or genuine concern, I certainly do appreciate it. For those who didn't, thank you for the voice lines. They will go to good use in my game. Coming soon." Chip had orchestrated the entire stunt to trick people willing to share his docs. The number was a burner, the name was fake, all of the info was fake. While ultimately no harm, no foul, it's honestly kind of disgusting that they did this to fight against targeted harassment. Because we all know that the best way to deter someone from making fun of you is to, dox them, right? And what was that targeted harassment that Chip engaged in the first place? Oh, he made fun of Pipka's character. For this, people said he deserves to be doxxed. Rather than disavow, one of Pipka's friends went back to the NSFW archive. "Chip, can you stop projecting your fetishes publicly and go back to jerking off to the Pipka NSFW archive you made?" They then post a screenshot indicating that Chip had indeed uploaded it himself. Pipka then reposted this and added, "I got sent the link and yeah, that's my art. Every piece of smut I've made." To which their friend replies, "Sending pornography in Discord servers filled with minors? I'm sure that's illegal." This added a completely new narrative, that he was a cyberstalker. This is genuinely beyond cyberbullying. At this point, he is cyberstalking me and I'm going to call the police.
And I know who it's coming from because I backtraced it. You've been reported to the cyber police and the state police.
I should probably create a Google Doc and finally reveal all the creepy shit around Chip and his friends harassing me. I usually am pretty quiet about it, but I keep the receipts in case I need to contact law enforcement. That Google Drive link might be my final straw though. She went so far as to report all the info she had readily available about him, as well as the archive, to the FBI. I feel bad for the poor FBI agent who has to look at that evidence before throwing it right into the trash. I genuinely have no idea what she's talking about or what the supposed crime is. The art wasn't leaked, it was posted publicly, as proven by the Internet Archive, but with threats of police involvement in a Google document, Chip felt forced to create his own. It was a defensive measure to debunk all the accusations over the years. This became the Pipka Files, which he released the next day. Framed as a confidential memo from the Secretary of the Posterior, he felt the need to address the flurry of serious accusations and misinformation. The first and most pressing claim is that he collected her fat fetish and put it on a Google Drive. He disproved this by finding its actual creator. The account was actually called Video Backup Account, with an avatar of Matthew Littlemore. This was linked to an identical YouTube channel, which had several unlisted videos. There, they identified themselves as Insane. He concludes, "Unless you think I've somehow traveled back in time to upload 2 videos on a burner account only to then out myself now, it's obviously not me." Chip also addresses the criminal accusations, which I covered the evidence for before. That meant finally releasing the screenshot proving they weren't a fan. Then he discusses the previously mentioned Octo. Disgusted by their actions, Chip reached out for the user's tag and managed to get in contact with him. That led to the following conversation. "Hi. Yo, what the fuck are you doing? Are you sending gore to people? Do you know of me at all, or are you just doing this for shits and giggles? I became aware of you. I wasn't aware of you when I was sending gore to people initially. I just dislike that side of Twitter, but it's funny to see their reactions. Anyone who says I'm affiliated with you is lying." That's now 3 separate individuals framing Chip. He'd surmise they have no stakes and view me as a target just as much as they do Pipka. That leaves us with his final point, that his actions don't constitute harassment. Chip defended his game as light riffing and playful banter. He pointed out the differences in his jokes and how he felt previous trolls went too far. To put it bluntly, I think Pipka's character just looks really funny and I like drawing it, and a natural side effect of that is that it may or may not totally align with Pipka's ideal vision of what fan art should conform to. The fact of the matter is that fat fetish-ass cartoon characters are funny. If you've ever gone on DeviantArt and had a chuckle at the strange and bizarre stuff you've found, you're guilty of this as well. Finding humor in art like that is relatively common, and I'd be hard-pressed to find a lot of scenarios where that could be considered harassment. Then he addressed the idea that it was body shaming. Chip admitted he had no idea what she really looked like, but was confident that it differed from a 400-pound imp. He writes, "Now, there are a surprising number of people who take issue with me calling Old Girthy a fetish character. Pipka has reframed every joke I've made about the girthiest into being about her real-life appearance. That's ignoring the art she made of morbidly obese women getting their belly buttons penetrated, lol, and the fact she's drawn NSFW of her own persona. But Pipka herself would state that her fetish had nothing to do with her real-life body, is simply not correlated." In response, he shows 2 screenshots of messages she'd sent on Discord. The first has her posting art of a fat cartoon with body goals. The second reads, "I wish I was chubbier." He clarifies, "If Pipka wants to do this, great, but stop pretending like it's a horrible thing to find it funny. You will never be as girthy as your character." He then reflected on the entire backlash. "I've had to defend myself from claims of pedophilia and revenge pornography. While being falsely accused of criminal acts, I'm also hated for stalking and harassment. This is in spite of people contacting my parents in an attempt to ruin my life." This is all a completely rational response to ribbing on someone's fat fetish. 2 days ago, I pretended to accidentally leak my personal info. This wasn't just for voice lines, but to see what they would do if it was available. People started celebrating, yet somehow it's an indictment of my character when they celebrate I got doxxed more than they did for a groomer. I think Pipka's character is funny, that's it. Everything about the game has been lighthearted because that's all it ever was. Is it weird to make a game about an e-celeb you find funny? Yes. Is it a complete waste of time? Without a doubt. Is it harassment? No, not at all whatsoever. I never condone any of what has happened to me if it happened to her, because that's not in the Brap Hogs code. Just had to throw that one in there, huh? In the face of pretty indisputable evidence, those who actually read it were forced to admit they were false. The person who accused Chip of revenge porn even publicly apologized, with the two making up in private, but the vast majority didn't bother. Death threats, fantasizing about beating his face in with rusty nails, the usual came in. To her credit, Pipka actually did concede that he hadn't created the drive, but that good faith quickly went out the window. When the previous cyberstalking allegation fell flat, she pointed to the screenshots. Pipka called it private info and attempting to reframe it as being about dysphoria. No, I'm not kidding. You took a conversation from a private server I was in out of context to defend yourself. And I'm talking about my dysphoria there anyway, not my weight. And it's also from 2021. That included lashing out at people who remained neutral and found it stupid. Above all else, I ask that you treat the situation with the seriousness it requires. This is beyond threatening my reputation or just bullying. He leaked some private info of mine in that doc, and he could have more I don't know about. This is obsessive and abusive behavior. Like, this is not some kind of random haha Twitter fight. He is genuinely scraping info from me from when I was barely an adult and using it to degrade me in order to justify his ongoing harassment. I like the addition of barely an adult because she was an adult, but she was almost a minor, so that makes it worse, right? He was also not scraping info. According to Chip, just like the Google Drive link, it was sent to him by someone else who disliked Pipka. And because I know people who hate me and hate this video will bring up this criticism. By the way, guys, if you ever see a collection of old screenshots from me, That was actually private info from when I was a minor, so that means nothing. Chip mocked this by creating a GoFundMe to order McDonald's. Little did he know it would be his last happy meal. Things seemed to peter out as the Pipka files were seen by hundreds of thousands of people. The public was still against Chip, but there was at least a resource to debunk criminal claims. But if you could believe it, things hadn't yet reached the boiling point. The next day, Pipka's account was suspended after being false flagged. She began tweeting from a new account called DSI Camera, calling it the worst day in her life. Even after several appeals, Twitter affirmed it wouldn't be restored. The culprit took credit and quickly was suspended. Experiencing such a blow to her platform, it wasn't long before eyes were placed back onto Chip. Whoever had contacted his mom before decided to release the information publicly. They created 3 separate accounts and replied to hundreds of tweets with his full name and address. They went beyond just his mom and started contacting extended family members with the false allegations. With his entire life put at risk, Chip deactivated the account. No one expressed any sympathy as you'd expect. Instead, they remarked that he deserved it and once again celebrated. At the end of this all, they'd finally gotten what they wanted, and Chipple Dipple was off the site forever. I mentioned before that third parties were doing reprehensible things in Chip's name. The same could potentially be said of what was done to Chip, but the key difference is how people reacted. No one cheered when horrible things were done to Pipka. In contrast, when horrible things happened to Chip, far worse than anything Pipka got, they openly celebrated it. Not only that, but the exculpatory document where he disproved the slanderous claims, it was actually mass reported and removed for violating terms of service. His Twitter account was also banned while deactivated. Ironically enough, his docs is still up. In light of this, Pipka took to her new account to affirm this was necessary. In that whole manifesto, that was the biggest breach of personal information, and it was taken out of context. I didn't want to get chubbier for sexual reasons at all. I wanted to because I had body dysphoria, and I was unhappy with my body. Genuinely, I do not feel right being skinny at all. I look wrong and I look ugly and stupid. I like being chubby because it's just how I perceive myself and it looks better overall. She's claiming this was taken out of context, and that Chip was using it to basically fuel transphobia. So let's actually look at what was being said. Here's the full screenshot. God, I'm so sweaty right now. My crack is literally soaking. I wish I was chubbier, but I get really sweaty and stinky easily. Okay, so that didn't really disprove anything. Well, what server were these from? It's the Cum Shack, with the channels Really Horny General, Your NSFW Art, Boobs, Butts, and Belly. But the real context that can be gleaned from these comes from the last two. No, not just that they're actively doing fat roleplay, because at this point, whatever, but the fact that many of the people defending Pipka for not having a fat fetish are straight up in this server. The person who said Chip was projecting, there they are talking about armpit fucking. The reality is that none of these people actually believed it was some form of body shaming or bigotry. They only said that because they shared the same fetishes. And the seed of all of this is that they don't want to be laughed at. I have my fair share of criticisms for Chip. It was a complete waste of time to spend so much effort on a game about this, and the cycle that someone made to mock him was largely true. If he hadn't made so many enemies over the years, alienating effectively every community and vicinity, he'd have gotten some benefit of the doubt. But none of this was justification for being defamed, painted as a cyberstalker, and now subject to life ruination. In contrast, here's what Pipka had to say about his fate. I heard what happened to Chip, in case you're wondering, and while I'm relieved, I still don't feel entirely safe. It's definitely comforting to know my stalker is missing, but he also has a bunch of friends who are still continuing to pester and harass me. He might have been kicked off the site, but Chip forever negatively impacted my life. I never wanted to have my legacy be that girl that's into fat chicks, but I've been mislabeled as that as a result of this behavior. Yeah, mislabeled. In many ways, Chipple Dipple makes himself hard to like. You're rare to get a sincere moment out of him. But by that same token, not liking someone for being annoying or cringy or just having a bad sense of humor isn't justification to try to ruin their life. Making a comedic game to laugh at someone's totally not public interest isn't targeted harassment. It's mockery. Something everyone does to someone else at some point in their life. It's doubtful this video will result in any justice for anyone involved, or that those who clearly overstep boundaries, intentionally lied, feigned outrage, or engaged in doxing will get comeuppance. So maybe at least it will serve as a reminder of what people are capable of when they get a little power on the internet. Ultimately, as far as power goes, Twitter seems to be the only place they have it. I've been Turkey Tom, thanks for watching, and until next time, leave me alone.